Have you confused trials from punishment whenever you experience some misfortune in life? Did you use this as an excuse to explain why you experience a hardship? Because many people do. Why? Because they are in denial that they are being disciplined or punished by the Lord. They find it shameful because people might ask them, what wrong thing have you done? Right? So David knew that he was being disciplined and punished for his covetousness of Uriah's wife, adultery with Bathsheba, and murder of Uriah the Hittite. He never blamed God or others. He understood he deserved adversity. He accepted the shame that came with punishment due to his sins. We learned last lesson that David had accepted Absalom back after the latter forced Joab to present him to his father, King David. In today's lesson, Absalom will push the envelope. He will attempt to become the king of Hebron and will try to invade the city of David. I will be drawing the title of our message for today from 2 Samuel chapter 12 verse 11. Behold, I will raise up evil against you out of your own house. So this is part 28 of the David saga, and we are now in 2 Samuel chapter 15. Though I do not want to put evil as theme of this message, it is what the chapter exposes. Evil takes advantage of God's children who are being punished or disciplined. Now, when I was a young believer, I thought that God can never inflict harm on people. It was always evil or demonic forces who will actually do that. In other words, it was always God's permissive will to allow evil forces to inflict pain on his people or any person as a way of discipline, punishment, correction, and hopefully restoration. But based on biblical data, I do not hold on to that view anymore. God can inflict direct pain. After he condemns as guilty all evil people and spiritual forces, after the final judgment, he himself will punish them to the lake of fire. It is not unrighteous and unloving for the holy God to inflict pain on rebels. It would be unjust for him and unbecoming of him if he would not punish them. However, in today's study, he allowed evil to take advantage of David, who was being punished for his sins, which actually demanded death penalty. What can we learn from David's response to God's punishment through the evil acts of his son Absalom? Letter A, evil steals. Absalom stole the hearts of Israelis from the king. So we'll be discussing verses 1 to 6. Absalom slowly presented himself to be a concerned leader for the welfare of the people of Israel. He began to win the acceptance of the people. Chapter 15 verse 1. In the course of time, Absalom provided himself with a chariot and horses and with 50 men to run ahead of him. He would get up early and stand by the side of the road leading to the city gate. Whenever anyone came with a complaint to be placed before the king for a decision, Absalom would call out to him, "What town are you from?" He would answer, "Your servant is from one of the tribes of Israel." Now, what's going on here? Absalom was making a name for himself. He was showing the people that he was powerful by having chariots and 50 men ahead of him. He was trying to get the people's attention. And the people might have thought that this was fine. After all, he was one of the king's sons. When we get to letter B, verses 7 to 12, we will find out the ulterior motive of Absalom. He actually wanted to become king. Verse 3, then Absalom would say to him, "Look, your claims are valid and proper, but there is no representative of the king to hear you." And Absalom would add, "If only I were appointed judge in the land, then everyone who has a complaint or case could come to me and I would see that they receive justice." Look how cunning Absalom was. He was directly connecting himself with people. He was a popularizer. David got famous for winning wars for the kingdom. Now, Absalom tried to win the hearts of the people by getting involved in the judicial and executive responsibilities of the king. And that is nearly usurpation of authority, but not quite. I say borderline. By hearing the claims of the people, whether they were valid or not, he would try to judge in their favor. And then he would present the problem and the solution to the people. You have no one to help you. I wish I can help you. I actually can help you. I just don't have the authority. See that? That provided some hope and an alternative solution. Absalom did not present himself to the king to give him the authority to help him judge the cases of the people. If the people would support him, perhaps he may have a good reason to present himself to the king. By hearing the cases of the people, he was able to sense if he had enough backing of the people. Remember, Israel was a monarchy. The people could not choose their leaders. Appointment of leaders come from top. The clamor of people may somehow help Avshalom get some government position. Verse 5. Also, whenever anyone approached him to bow down before him, Avshalom would reach out his hand, take hold of him, and kiss him. Avshalom behaved in this way toward all the Israelis who came to the king asking for justice. And so he stole the hearts of the people of Israel. So Avshalom knew where and how to connect with people. He would initiate communication with them, and he would accept people bowing down to him, and then he would raise them up. As one of the king's sons, the people would naturally accept conversation with him, since they are actually looking for the king's help. Remember, Avshalom had a chariot and with at least 50 men with him, so people would actually respect him for that. Holding of hands and kissing the people would really make the people feel very special and accepted, and near to the heart of that leader. Do you know anyone here in the Philippines who do not or did not have the authority to give justice to people, but he would help them out with their legal needs by exposing their cases in television and in the internet? I think you have a person or persons in mind. The two of them are now part of the government. The third one is also running for public office next year. Am I correct? I'm not saying they're stealing the hearts of the people from the president, since we have a different kind of bureaucracy here in the Philippines. So, evil steals. Expect evil people to strengthen and position themselves against you. Do not be negligent and slow of your responsibilities. That's a warning for David. Otherwise, evil people will use that against you. Evil works secretly and cunningly, just like what Avshalom did here. So continue to do the right thing, especially when you are under discipline. So that's on the side of David. Letter B, evil usurps. Avshalom proclaimed himself as king. So let's go to 7 to 12. Avshalom secretly sent proclaimers throughout the kingdom to announce that he has become king in Hebron, to the surprise of the people and of the king. Though he wanted to become king, Avshalom was patient. He played the long game. He stole the hearts of the people first for 4 years. He had to be sure that he had enough people supporting him. Now he was ready to take the next step. What is his objective? As we read further, he wanted the people all throughout the kingdom to proclaim him as king in Hebron. Verse 7. At the end of 4 years, Avshalom said to the king, "Let me go to Hebron and fulfill a vow I made to the Yahweh. While your servant was living at Geshur in Aram, I made this vow. If the Yahweh takes me back to Jerusalem, I will worship the Yahweh in Hebron." First, he deceived the king as to why he wanted to go to Hebron. Remember, Hebron was where David ruled first for 7 years before he became king over all Israel from Jerusalem. Avshalom was born and raised in Hebron. He knew the place and the people there. He was home there, and people knew him there. Now, what reason did Avshalom give to the king, which would be hard for the king to refuse? It was a vow that he made before the Yahweh while he was in exile. Okay. The law says in Deuteronomy chapter 23 verses 21 to 23 that anyone who makes a vow to the Yahweh shall surely and timely fulfill them. So then, how can the king deny his son his request to be permitted to go to Hebron? He didn't want to be on the way of Avshalom to fulfill his vow. Why did Avshalom want to worship the Yahweh in Hebron? Remember, the ark and the tabernacle was in Jerusalem, not in Hebron anymore. Well, maybe because he saw his father start to rule as king from Hebron. So that could be a good starting point for him, especially that he was known there. Well, of course, he would not disclose to his father his real intent of going there, right? Verse 9, the king said to him, "Go in peace." So he went to Hebron. When the king permitted him to go to his hometown, Avshalom must be ecstatic. His plan was succeeding. Perhaps he brought with him a documentation or authorization from the king, addressed to the elders of the tribe of Yehuda, especially in Hebron, to receive him and help him fulfill his vow. Correct? Verse 10, then Avshalom sent secret messengers throughout the tribes of Israel to say, "As soon as you hear the sound of the trumpets, then say, Avshalom is king in Hebron." Now, Avshalom was about to steal the authority from the king, previously the hearts of the people, by giving them justice. Okay? The author tells us how Avshalom did it. He sent conspirators to sound the trumpet and declare that Avshalom has become king in Hebron. This was not an unusual way of declaring someone to be the new king. But it would be very surprising that Israel would have a new king. Has an enemy invaded Jerusalem? We haven't heard of any external force winning over David. Has the king been killed? Why would we have a new king from Hebron? Has Jerusalem been destroyed? So people might be very confused at what was going on. Verse 11, 200 men from Jerusalem had accompanied Absalom. They had been invited as guests and went quite innocently, knowing nothing about the matter. Now, the author does not tell us when exactly the proclamation occurred. He just told us how he planned doing it. I think he wants us to think that he actually succeeded in doing that implicitly. Now, verses 11 to 12 simply gives us how he deceived many people from Jerusalem joining him there in Hebron. And they were not aware that he was using them to make it appear that they were on his side and that they were supporting his induction as king. Verse 12, while Absalom was offering sacrifices, he also sent for Ahithophel the Giloni, David's counselor, to come from Gilo, his hometown. And so the conspiracy gained strength, and Absalom's following kept on increasing. Now, Absalom's vow to worship the Yahweh involved offering sacrifices. He had to do that. Now, we're not sure if he was personally doing this or he had a priest with him to conduct that for him. Well, anyway, the important thing is the defection of Ahithophel to Absalom was a big loss for David. Later, we will see how hurt David was with this defection. So that's letter B, evil usurps. So be careful of evil people who will deceive to accomplish their agenda against you. So that's what Absalom did to the people of Jerusalem, telling them to go to his special event in Hebron. You cannot stop evil people from doing what they try to do secretly from you. So David had no idea that Absalom was trying to usurp his authority from there. Do your best to be stable when they begin to act directly against you. So this surprised David. But as for David being disciplined, he needed to be stable. Letter C, evil pushes away. David escapes from Jerusalem, verses 13 to 22. Instead of complaining to God and preparing to defend his position, David accepted that he had to abandon his throne and avoid direct conflict against advancing Absalom. Now, Absalom had gained significant advantage against the king. So now we turn to David. How will David respond to the threat of Absalom as he was about to march toward Jerusalem? Verse 13. A messenger came and told David, "The hearts of the people of Israel are with Absalom." Now, did David sense that the people began siding with Absalom? Or did he belittle it? Perhaps he was sensing it, but he did not take it seriously. Now, I think David's intelligence agency failed him here. So, it took a messenger to make the king aware that the people all throughout the land had sided with Absalom because of the trumpet and the proclamation. That must be the surprise of his life. It was probably one of the most confusing and difficult and later shameful moments in his life because he did not expect this to happen to him. Verse 14, Then David said to all his officials who were with him in Jerusalem, "Come, we must flee, or none of us will escape from Absalom. We must leave immediately, or he will move quickly to overtake us and bring ruin on us and put the city to the sword." Having no peaceful choice and no way to negotiate, David had to decide and act immediately. Defend his throne by fighting Absalom or go, leave. He decided to escape and flee from Jerusalem. He needed to abandon his throne. And that must be very surprising because being dethroned was not mentioned in the judgment of the Yahweh through Nathan. David wanted to spare the city from any bloodbath. It would weaken his kingdom and the enemies might take advantage of the civil war. He knew nothing could stop Absalom. Verse 15, the king's official answered him, "Your servants are ready to do whatever our lord the king chooses." Well, the good thing was David still had loyal people with him, ready to sacrifice and flee with him. I see this as God's grace on him. Verse 16, the king set out with his entire household following him, but he left 10 concubines to take care of the palace. Under his command, David's whole family went with him. Now, did he intentionally leave 10 concubines to take care of the palace? Either, letter A, thinking that Absalom would not destroy the palace and he would not dare to harm defenseless women. Letter B, He was ready to sacrifice them instead of his wives, knowing what the prophecy said in chapter 12 verse 11. Before your very eyes, I will take your wives and give them to one of who is close to you, and he will sleep with your wives in broad daylight. So that's what the prophecy said, wives, not concubines. Verse 17, so the king set out with all the people following him, and they halted at the edge of the city. David led the departure. Since the people were already aware of the declaration of the kingship of Absalom, they probably were surprised to see David concede to Absalom and abandon the throne. They must be very surprised, and some people may have wept, and some people might have rejoiced. Verse 18, all his men marched past him, along with all the Kerethites and Pelethites, and all the 600 Greaties who had accompanied him from Gath marched before the king. The most loyal people to David were those who have been with him for a very long time, since 1 Samuel chapter 21. The Kerethites, the Pelethites, and the Gittites were specifically mentioned as loyal to him. These were not ethnically Israelis, but naturally made Israelis. Verse 19, the king said to Ittai the Gitti, why should you come along with us? Go back and stay with King Absalom. You are a foreigner, an exile from your homeland. You came only yesterday. And today shall I make you wander about with us, when I do not know where I am going? Go back and take your people with you. May the Yahweh show you kindness and faithfulness. So the king showed consideration to Ittai. He was kind enough to say that the Gitti did not have to join him in this difficult and uncertain moment of his life. The accompaniment of the Kerethites and the Pelethites and the Gittites were significant to David, though they were not ethnically Israel, as I told before. I think David saw his sincerity. He was not pushing them away out of fear that they could soon defect to Absalom, since they were not ethnically Israelis. No, rather he was concerned of their welfare, and he did not want them to get involved in his conflict. Now, it would be unnecessary. They could be silent or be neutral and win either way. And so he blessed them in the name of the Yahweh when he sent him away. Now, some leaders fight for followers, the more the better. So they convince them to vocalize their support for them. They urge them to fight for them and shield them from any attacks. But not so with David. He loved his followers and he wanted them to be safe. He wanted the least number of people with him in his escape. See that? Verse 21, but Ittai replied to the king, as surely as the Yahweh lives, and as my lord the king lives, wherever my lord the king may be, whether it means life or death, there will your servant be. As much as David did not want Ittai to be involved, Ittai insisted on joining him, with possibly nothing to gain and everything to lose. This was a very heroic decision. He was ready to give his whole life for David. He was very convinced that David was the right leader to follow, even at the lowest point of his leader's life. He really believed in David, even when all reason seems to point to avoiding any involvement with David. Now, I could imagine David trying to encourage any doubter and any double-minded person not to join him. Remember, the Lord Jesus did the same in Luke 9 verse 57 to 62. The Son of Man has no place to lay his head. Let the dead bury the dead. And no one puts his hand to the plow and looks back is fit for the service in the kingdom of God. If you are a leader, do you have a supporter like Ittai? You're blessed if you have. I remember Ruth. She chose to join her mother-in-law Naomi all the way until they got back to Bethlehem. Verse 22, David said to Ittai, go ahead, march on. So Ittai the Gitti marched on with all his men and the families that were with him. So then David allowed Ittai to join him in exile. So that's letter C, evil pushes away. So learn to be emotionally strong when the worst of your discipline from the Lord has come. Accept it. When it is time to back off and do not make things worse. Try to save and spare others from your suffering. The Lord may give you a loyal supporter who will be with you in your worst moments. Letter D, evil divides. David sent the Ark of the Elohim back to Jerusalem. So we're now in verses 23 to 29. David did not force God to take his side in his exile by bringing the Ark of the Covenant with him. He sent the Ark and the religious leaders back to Jerusalem. Verse 23, The whole countryside wept aloud as all the people passed by. The king also crossed the Kidron Valley, and all the people moved on toward the wilderness. The author tells us that many people in the rural areas sided with the king. They wept at what happened to the king. Perhaps these were the people that Absalom did not bother to convince to accept him as king. The king did not have any problems passing by the countryside and the Kidron Valley. Kidron Valley is on the eastern side of the city of David. It is the valley that separates the city of David and the Mount of Olives. Verse 24, Zadok was there too, and all the Levites who were with him were carrying the Ark of the Covenant of Elohim. They set down the Ark of the Elohim, and Eviathar offered sacrifices until all the people had finished leaving the city. So the religious sector supported and joined David in his exile. That must be very comforting for David. They cannot leave the Ark of the Covenant in Jerusalem, so they had to bring it with them to follow David. They still offered sacrifices. In other words, they still wanted to worship the Yahweh even when God allowed this thing to happen to them. They knew that this was part of the Yahweh's discipline on David, and they were supporting him by joining him in his punishment rather than join Absalom. They were not political players who kept moving from one party to another, whichever is stronger. Verse 25, Then the king said to Zadok, Take the Ark of the Elohim back into the city. If I find favor in the Yahweh's eyes, he will bring me back and let me see it and his dwelling place again. But if he says, I'm not pleased with you, then I am ready. Let him do to me whatever seems good to him. David told Zadok to return to the city with the ark. He did not want to show that he was forcing the Yahweh on his side. It was not proper to involve the religious sector in his conflict with Absalom. Look at how David placed his faith in the hands of the Yahweh. He didn't say, The Yahweh has rejected me. I give up, so you go on. Rather, he said, If I find favor in the Yahweh's eyes, he will bring me back and let me see it and his dwelling place again. In other words, let me find favor from the Yahweh as I go to exile. And if it works, I will see you all soon. If not, I accept my fate. This is the Yahweh's hand. I will not resist it. It's very nice. Verse 27, The king also said to Zadok the priest, Do you understand? Go back to the city with my blessing. Take your son Achimaatz with you and also Eviathar, son of Jehonathan. You and Eviathar return with your 2 sons. David insisted Zadok to return to the city with all his people in the religious sector. Perhaps Zadok refused to abandon David, but the king insisted. You know, the accompaniment of Zadok with him during the exile would have been very favorable to him, especially if he had to inquire of the Yahweh through the Urim and the Thummim, just like before in 1 Samuel. However, he deemed it best for the priest to return to the city and take care of the people there. Verse 28, I will wait at the fords in the wilderness until word comes from you to inform me. So David established a way for Zadok to communicate with him. He needed reliable information from Zadok, who could see what was happening inside the city, so he would be his spy. The most important news for David to receive was if the Yahweh has something to say for him, or if the Yahweh has favored him to return to the city safely. Right? Verse 29, So Zadok and Eviathar took the Ark of the Elohim back to Jerusalem and stayed there. Finally, the priests returned to the city with the ark safe and secured in the tabernacle. It was very important for the Yahweh and for the people of Israel that the religious services would continue to function well despite the political rivalry between David and his son Absalom. So that's letter D. Evil divides. When you are suffering due to punishment, you may have more sympathizers than you could ever imagine. You're blessed. As much as possible, even if it is tempting to have your sympathizers and supporters surrounding you, do not get them involved in your suffering. Let them continue with their lives. Let the people continue to serve and worship the Lord. Letter E. Evil shames. David accepted shame, defection, and loyalty. Verses 30 to 37. David took the shame of being dethroned. He had to accept that Ahithophel sided with Absalom. He also had to send Hushai to spy for him in Jerusalem. Verse 30, But David continued up the Mount of Olives, weeping as he went. His head was covered and he was barefoot. All the people with him covered their heads too, and were weeping as they went up. We can see the humanity of David here. He could see the city from the Mount of Olives. As he had lesser people with him, the emotions started to strike him. He was getting sadder and lonelier. Normally, you do not want to see your leaders break down with such an emotion because that would give you a doubt if he could think well and lead you safely. He was not hiding here. He was open about his feelings and emotions. He was hurt and he was very affected. He was not being a macho guy, a tough guy. He was not in denial. Covering his head was a way to express shame. Perhaps he thought about how this all started when he desired for Bathsheba in chapter 11. Maybe he was expressing regret for all the mistakes he made. The people joined him even though they were mere victims of his sin. However, they stuck with him. They could have easily defected to their brother Absalom. Verse 31. Now David had been told, Ahithophel is among the conspirators with Absalom. So David prayed, turn the counsel of Ahithophel into foolishness, O Yahweh. David received the very bad news of all the people. Ahithophel defected to Absalom, a very trusted confidant. He knew so many things about the king, and he could make things worse for him. Now, what did David do? He prayed. He asked the Yahweh to turn the counsel of Ahithophel into foolishness. In other words, he admitted that he could not do anything, but he acknowledged that God could. Was this a good prayer? I think so. David knew that the Yahweh has not anointed Absalom as his successor. Otherwise, he would have known that and he would have peacefully turned over the kingship to Absalom. Verse 32. When David arrived at the summit where the people used to worship Elohim, Hushai the Archi was there to meet him, his robe torn and dust on his head. Now this is very beautiful. David went to the summit, the place of worship. I think it is implicit that he went there to worship the Yahweh. He humbled himself before God. He worshipped the Yahweh, just like what he did after his first child from Bathsheba died. He accepted the Yahweh's discipline. He returned to God. I think we should do the same when we are down, when we are being disciplined, when we are isolated from people, and when we feel shamed. We should worship, pray, and serve the Yahweh and put our hope in Him because there is no better way. A character named Hushai is introduced here. He was an Archi, not an Israeli, a naturalized Israeli. The Archis were one of the peoples that Israel dispossessed during the conquest of Joshua. So some of them were integrated with Israel. Yet this man was loyal to David, a blessing of God to him. I think it was because he was a great leader, even to those non-native Israelis. Verse 33, David said to him, If you go with me, you will be a burden to me. Hushai intentionally came to David to mourn with him. He did not have to, but he did. He was showing his support for the dethroned king. Verse 34, But if you return to the city and say to Absalom, Your Majesty, I will be your servant. I was your father's servant in the past, but now I will be your servant. Then you can help me by frustrating Ahithophel's advice. Now, we can see that Hushai, not an ethnic Israeli, was David's now trusted advisor and spy in the presence of Absalom. It's amazing, right? So we can see here David being a good leader. Though Hushai wanted to join him to the exile, David showed kindness to him. He did not want this Archi to be a burden to him, but rather a benefit. So he gave him a plan. He made him his spy, but not against Absalom, but against Ahithophel for his betrayal. All he had to do is to frustrate his advices to Absalom. He did not ask him to murder or to harm Ahithophel. Being a servant to the new authority was good enough to be in a position as a rival advisor to Ahithophel. David knew that Hushai was smart enough how to do that. Verse 35, Won't the priests Zadok and Abiathar be there with you? Tell them anything you hear in the king's palace. Their two sons, Ahimaaz, son of Zadok, and Jehonathan, son of Abiathar, are there with them. Send them to me with anything you hear. So David gave Hushai further assurance. The priests Zadok and Abiathar would be his trusted friends there. All he had to do was to send messages to them, and they will send his message to David. He can also trust the two sons of the two priests. He will have enough support inside the city. He would not be alone. He will be working with them for David. Now, of course, this was a move that David could do as a political rival to his son. Now, I do not encourage any one of you to do the same. Get a spy against a traitor friend. Not everything in the scripture is prescriptive or giving us an example and application in our lives. Some things in the scriptures are merely descriptive. We can draw the proper lessons everywhere, but there are appropriate application in each lesson. Okay, so be careful of that. So Hushai, David's confidant, arrived at Jerusalem as Absalom was entering the city. With the obedience of Hushai, David has positioned himself well to a possible return to Jerusalem. As he said in verse 25, "If I find favor in the eyes of Yahweh, He will bring me back and let me see it again and His dwelling place." So that's letter E. It is fine to weep when evil has shamed you. Some people will understand you and join you. Do not be shaken when your most trusted friend has turned against you. Leave justice to the Lord. Worship the Lord even when being disciplined. The Lord may give you a more trustworthy advisor than the one you lost. Behold, I will raise up evil against you out of your own house. So the Lord disciplined David here. Letter A, evil steals. Letter B, evil usurps. Letter C, evil pushes away. Letter D, evil divides. And letter E, evil shames.